Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Hope you're enjoying this beautiful spring weather. The pollen is finally starting to clear a little bit. Oh, so happy. I've had a rough one this year. Really, that pollen's been getting to me like crazy. It was just so heavy. It was so much heavier than in previous years because of the weather patterns we've been having. But today, I'm going to talk about probably three plants. First two come from the Spring Foraging Cookbook, and they're short entries. And that's good because I got a very long entry on the one from Medicinal Shrubs. It's Hawthorn, Cretaceous, and Hawthorn is so useful. It has such an interesting history. It is one you absolutely must grow. Okay, this is this one could probably save your life. I mean, it could keep you from having a heart attack. You're gonna want Hawthorn. Okay, but as far as the foraging plants, they're trailing arbutus and twisted stalk. And trailing arbutus, this is again for the Spring Foraging Cookbook. It's what I would consider a mild, a minor, not mild, a minor wild edible. Not really worth trying to collect in any real amount. Grab a little bit, that's all. It's also called Mayflower, but of course, Mayflower is a different plant. Mayflower or trailing arbutus is one of the earliest flowers to appear in spring, and it is as beautiful as its scent is sweet. It's absolutely gorgeous. The flower is tube shaped. It's called a corolla. And in early spring, the flower is just a nice little snack on the trail if you find some. I'm sure it's nutritious, but it would take a lot to make a meal. And the plant's just really not common enough in most areas to harvest much. You know, that flower is necessary for the reproductive activity of the plant. If you go around and eat all the flowers, you're going to wipe out your trailing arbutus, which is one of the prettiest spring wildflowers there is, and that would be a real shame. In fact, depending on where you live, it may be protected in some places. It's just not that common. Now, why did I include it? Well, you could definitely grow some. You can get it growing in pots. You can get it growing in your yard. You can have beautiful and wonderful smelling trailing arbutus, and then you're free to eat as much as you want, because that's now your plant. You're responsible for reproducing it and making sure it stays vibrant. So there you go. Now, one you probably don't grow in your garden, but I do. It was on the property when I got there. It was in the flower beds. It's called twisted stalk. And it's somewhat similar in appearance to Solomon seal and false Solomon seal and Indian cucumber. In fact, twisted stalk is often called Indian cucumber. But it's different, and when the plants are mature, you can really tell them apart. Early in the spring can be kind of hard. That's okay though, because it's interchangeable with those. The young spring shoots are good raw and salad, and they taste like cucumber, and that's why it's often called Indian cucumber. Although milder in flavor, they can be included with asparagus-like wild edibles such as Solomon seal and false Solomon seal. The main thing about twisted stalk is, for me, is its abundance. It's one of the most common wild edibles where I live. So even though it's not like super flavorful, I can eat a ton of it every spring. So I love this one, and given that it doesn't really have any poisonous lookalikes that I'm come to mind at least right now, it's just like a no-brainer for me to grab some salmon seal, false salmon seal, and twisted stalk, and pickle them all up together, or cook them all up together, or whatever you want, right? So a really easy and tasty way to use this plant is in a potato galette. Now, several desserts are called galettes. It's a really common dessert in French cooking, but this one's a savory galette, and it's a real winner. It's really good, actually. If you like potatoes au gratin, and you like pot pies, and you like a lot of those kind of creamy, rich, buttery flavors, give this one a shot. All right. So wash and chop up about a pound or so of twisted stalk, along with some ramps or onions and shallots, a few mushrooms and celery, optional green pepper. I like green pepper. Um, it's a summer plant for me, though. You know, green peppers. It's hard to grow green peppers on a northwest facing slope at about 5,000 feet elevation in the mountains of North Carolina, where it rains or snows 270 days a year, and every other day it's got fog, except for the dead of winter. And then we do those really clear, crisp, bright blue, sunny days. I mean, it looks like the freaking Arctic Circle up there. In fact, I'm always reminded of an old Jefferson Airplane song called "An Eskimo Blue Day," and I know most people only know the Jefferson Airplane from their hits in the '60s. You know, psychedelic rock, White Rabbit, one pill makes you larger and one pill makes you small, and all that. And the antics of their two front people, Grace Slick and Paul Kantner. Grace Slick was a good singer, and so was Paul, really. He was a pretty good guitarist, too, but, she was really sort of a model turned singer, and he was really more the showman. The heart of the band was really Jorma Kaukonen and Jack Cassidy. Jorma, phenomenal guitar player. The dude could play anything. A very good blues player. Later on, he went on and did Hot Tuna and such. And I got to hang out with him, a little bit in the '90s around Doc Watson and learn from him. Cool guy, intelligent, super talented. I mean, he could tell you all the stories about all the old blues musicians that he had gotten to know and learn from, when he was younger, and he was glad to pass those on. Jack Cassidy he rocked. I mean, he was awesome. The bass player. If you like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, you remember their bass player Flea? I don't know if he like imitated everything Jack Cassidy did from his appearance to the way he played music, or if it was a coincidence. But I mean, the two could have been like father and son, even though they were not related. Well, as far as I know, they weren't. I think who knows as far as that's concerned. But Jack and Yorma, I mean, man, they played everything from like blues rock and psychedelic rock. They could play classical. They could play acoustic blues, Piedmont blues. They were actually did a couple of punk rock albums in the late '70s, early '80s. I mean, it's totally forgotten, but yeah, I mean, they were like hardcore punks. I mean, from hippie to hardcore punk in the course of 20 years, and then back to playing acoustic blues. I mean, these guys were phenomenally talented, and uh, just today, I recorded a tune for my new channel on YouTube where I'm discussing old blues, Piedmont blues mostly, some Delta, and I did Hesitation Blues, an old Reverend Gary Davis tune. And Yorma actually studied with Reverend Gary Davis. And so when I was a kid, like 16, 17 years old, and I was hanging around Doc Watson, I got to meet Yorma, and I'm like, wow, you're Yorma Calkin of the Jefferson Airplane. And he's like, yeah, I don't really play that kind of stuff anymore, except on special occasions. He just picks up his acoustic guitar, and he starts playing Hesitation Blues, and my jaw's on the floor. So I learned a couple of licks on that song from him, and it's pretty cool. It's just always awesome the way things kind of go full circle. But anyway, I know I've wandered far astray again, as I often do. But yeah, peppers are hard to grow where I live. I think that was where I was heading with that. So anyway, saute your veggies in olive oil with salt and pepper, and slice thinly a few of your favorite potatoes. I like Yukon Gold. Yukon Gold has a naturally buttery flavor, but russets will totally work for this. So would red potatoes, anything. Little fingerling potatoes, those lovely little purple Peruvian potatoes. Those are delicious, by the way. But yeah, Yukon Gold is probably going to be my first pick. Slice them thin like you're going to make a gratin, potato au gratin. But anyway, add some dairy and some grated cheese. Grated cheese of your choice. So of course, Parm, Swiss. Swiss would be more traditional. Heavy cream would be more traditional, but you can go from half and half to whole milk. Don't go with skim milk. Don't ever buy skim milk. Skim milk is evil. It's a work of the devil. So lightly salt and pepper each layer, and add any herbs and spices you like, either some parsley and nutmeg, maybe some Creole seasoning. I always throw my Creole seasoning in there, whatever your preference is. Um, Parsley and nutmeg is more classic. Um, to me, nutmeg can be a little sweet sometimes. It just makes things. But what it does is it brings the flavors of the vegetables and other herbs into the back of your sinuses. Same with celery. Celery has a similar effect, especially if you use the tops. They have essential oils, and they carry the food up the back of your sinus and enhance the taste of the food. It's almost like they use MSG, like in Chinese restaurants. Ancient MSG, before MSG was invented, was celery salt and nutmeg. You can't go wrong with that, but you got to remember, like in Creole seasoning, you got a little cumin in there, and you got a little paprika, and that's going to do the same thing. Those are also going to carry those flavors. So go with whatever you like. I like more savory. You might like more sweet. So totally up to you. I like to put a second layer of veggies on top, but that's not really traditional. Usually it's just a basic one layer dish. It should basically look like a potato pie. Baked for about a half hour or so at 350 to 400. Top crumbled with bacon and a lot more cheese, and put it back in and let the cheese get brown and bubbly. Now, one thing I left out, while I call this a galette does usually have a pie shell base, and it's almost like a savory tart, if you want to think of it that way. Um, you can absolutely do this with a pie shell base, store-bought or homemade. I like to make my homemade pie shell nice and thin. Don't make the crust too big. Don't overwhelm it. Oftentimes, though, when I make this, I'll skip the crust and just put more cheese on top, maybe even some cracker crumbs. Like if I've got some Ritz crackers or something I want to get rid of, or some, sourdough bread I want to crumble up on top. So you can do it either way. It's of course far easier to do it in a casserole dish in the oven without worrying about browning a crust, or than it is without than it is with, I should say. But if you have the time, if you want to get some all-purpose flour and a little bit of salt and sugar and a little bit of nice ice cold butter and make a good pie crust, you can turn this from like a side dish to a main dish, and really it's very impressive, and it's absolutely delicious. And yeah, my preference is with the pie crust, but 9 times out of 10 I skip the crust. Yeah. Yeah, I hate to admit that, but I do. I skip the crust. Anyway, puff pastry can certainly be used. Anything like that. Phyllo dough. Phyllo dough would be perfect. But yeah, that's totally up to you. Do what you like there. Now let's get into Hawthorn, and Hawthorn is a giant family. There are 78 varieties of hawthorn with documented use in herbal medicine. I am not going to even try uh, at all. And native to my region, they're about 40, 30 at least. I mean, seriously, we got a ton of hawthorn. The only one, but the only one in shrub form. Now, normally this is a tree, and this is from my book, Medicinal Shrubs, but that narrows it down. It makes it easier. Crataegus uniflora, or one-flowered hawthorn. I've never noticed it to actually have one flower, but it's also known as dwarf hawthorn. Dwarf meaning, of course, a small hawthorn tree, which is more like a bush, and that one is easy to identify. And yeah, so although these days hawthorn is mainly relegated to being a landscape plant, useful in keeping out intruders. It's got thorns on it. You can use that. You can incorporate that in your landscape as a hedge plant, or used to make a rustic jam. Unfortunately, too few people still do that, and hawthorn berries are delicious. You should absolutely be growing this and making your own jam and wine from them. It's one of the most storied and useful plants in herbal medicine. It's said to be the wood that was the staff of Saint Joseph. Saint Joseph was said to carry the father, foster father Jesus, a staff of hawthorn, and the thorns, the crown of thorns, was said to be woven from hawthorn, and that's very likely because it was native to the area, and especially the one native there has really big thorns. I mean, almost like honey locust sized thorns. And for that reason, it became an early symbol of the Catholic Church. You might see a cross, you might see a fish, you might see a hawthorn bush to signify that someone was Catholic and welcomed other Catholics to their door. That was very common in the early church. You would put up one of those symbols, and anyone in the area that needed help would come to your door, and you were expected. It was your Christian duty to give them a place to sleep and food to eat and take care of them if they were sick. And so hawthorns planted in it's really one of our first landscaping plants because every church, every monastery, and every Christian home had probably a hawthorn tree. And actually, early Christians used the hawthorn tree as a Christmas tree. The tradition of using firs and spruces and evergreens didn't really start until Christendom spread into Western Europe, really into more the northern Germanic countries, getting into like Sweden and Norway and the Norse country, where they had this tradition of using evergreen boughs as a symbol of like eternal life. And the early Christians got there and said, well, hey, they already have this tradition. They're already decorating with evergreen. We have a tradition of making a Christmas tree out of hawthorn. Why don't we just put the two together, and from now on the Christmas tree will be something they can identify with, and it will help convert them to Christianity. And they did. And our beloved Christmas tree comes from that tradition, which, some people say, oh, it's a pagan tradition. No, it's a synthesis of two cultures. And the original Christmas tree was a hawthorn tree from which had been made the crown of thorns, which is, of course, very appropriate to Easter. Been used for medicine for thousands of years. And Dioscorides, Greek herbalist some 2,000 years ago, said that drinking the seed would cause a woman to give birth to a male child. Uh, I don't think that has any relevance or legitimacy to it whatsoever, but they believe that if hawthorn was used, you were more likely to have a son than a daughter. But it was also used for the cleansing of the menstrual flow before the time of intercourse. Just, it's astringent. It would dry things up. Let's just go with that. Getting into more practical use, in Culpeper's time, this is England, it was so commonly planted that he stated, and remember, this is just after England became a Protestant nation. England had been one of the leading Catholic nations for hundreds of years before this point, and people planted hawthorn in every Christian yard to signify that they were Christians. He said, it is not my intention to trouble you with the description of this tree, which is so well known that it needs none. It is ordinarily but a hedge bush, although being pruned and dressed, it grows into a tree of reasonable height. This is early 1600s. He says, as for the hawthorn tree at Glastonbury, which is said to flower yearly on Christmas Day, it rather shows the superstition of those that observe it for the time of its flowering than any great wonder. And yes, hawthorn has a reputation, especially those in England, especially that at Glastonbury, of blooming on Christmas Day. And he said that it just basically bloomed in that general time frame, maybe a few days before, a few days after. That was more folklore. But as far as medicinal, he said the seasoned berries beaten to a powder, being drank in wine, are held singularly good against a stone, good for kidney and bladder stones, are good for the dropsy, that's retaining of fluid. The distilled water of the flower stays the lask, that's usually what can be a discharge, a diarrhea, The seeds cleared from the down, bruised and boiled in wine and drank, is good for the inward tormenting pains, cramping, in other words, intestinal cramps. If cloths or sponges be wet in distilled water and applied to any place where thorns or splinters of the like do abide in the flesh, it will notably draw them forth. Yes, it's astringent. And basically a tea made of it, used as a compress, can help draw out splinters and thorns. It tightens that tissue and kind of pushes them back out. It's really nice. He says, and thus you see the thorn gives the medicine for its own pricking, and so doth almost everything else. He was a very big believer in like cures like. Yeah, it, interesting character, if nothing else. Now, Galen, going back we're back to ancient Rome now, says the haws and berries of the hawthorn tree doth stay the lask, the senses and all. No, wait a minute, that's not Galen, that's Gerard. I made the same mistake last week. Anyway, Gerard says the haws, we're back in England, we're about 1500s now though. The haws and berries of the hawthorn tree, as Dioscorides writeth, do stay the lask, and the menses, and other fluxes of blood. Some authors write that the stones beaten to powder and given to drunk are good against the stone. In other words, the seeds of the hawthorn would help with kidney stones and such. Oh, my word. Anyway, but getting up to 1930s England, Miss Grieve, by now the pharmacists and doctors are using it for its cardiac effect. And she said it was cardiac, diuretic, astringent, and tonic, mainly used as a cardiac tonic in organic and functional heart troubles. Both flowers and berries are astringent and useful in a decoction to cure sore throats, useful as a diuretic in dropsy and kidney troubles. In Ireland, John Kehoe says the fruit is dry and astringent and stops excessive menstruation. Flowers are good for breaking up stone in the kidneys and bladders. Now, again, as I said, we have many American versions of hawthorn. And the Native Americans certainly made use of them. The Lumbees, for instance, used it in an infusion of hawthorn leaves, and the Lumbees are from southeastern North Carolina, so I grew up with them and know a lot, actually, a lot more about their herbal traditions than I do about ancient Greek, But anyway, it's kind of sort of my go-to, whether it's the Lumbee tradition or the Mountain Appalachian tradition, the Cherokee and Catawban. But anyway, the Lumbee is used in an infusion of hawthorn leaves, flowers, and haws. It's a dried fruit as a cardiac and circulatory tonic. Some Lumbee healers recommended hawthorn to treat heart disease. To treat heart disease, maybe the third time I get it right, they deduced had been caused by kidney problems, arterial spasms, irregular heartbeat, or thickening of the heart walls. And hawthorn's like kind of the go-to for arrhythmia and irregular heartbeat. It's like the primary herb. The Lumbee thought that hawthorn controlled both high and low blood pressure by dilating the blood vessels and improving the pumping action of the heart. Some Lumbee used the leaves as a substitute for tobacco and tea. The roasted seeds were ground into a type of coffee. Local healers used a bark tea to promote good circulation and prevent current spasms. Reportedly, the berries were eaten by some to increase the appetite. They have a bitterness to them, and it's a good stomach tonic, as they call it. Now, Jethro Kloss, writing about 1920s, he wrote of the English hawthorn or maybush or thorn apple. It's another old name for it, thorn apple. He said it was antispasmodic, sedative, and tonic. It's also very much used like it's somewhat related to viburnum, and so it's very good for menstrual cramping and such. He said the herb is very good when treating either high or low blood pressure by strengthening the action of the heart. It helps many blood pressure problems. The tea is good for nervous tension and sleeplessness. Take 1 or 2 capsules daily. Make an infusion by steeping 1 teaspoonful of the flowers in 1/2 cupful of water, and take 1 to 2 cups a day, taking only a swallow at a time. May be sweetened with honey if desired. Now, getting up to modern use, Plants for Future says the fruit and flower of hawthorns are well known in herbal folk medicine as a heart tonic, and modern research has borne out this use. The fruits and flowers have a hypotensive effect as well as acting as a diuretic and mild heart tonic. They are especially indicated in the treatment of weak heart combined with high blood pressure. Prolonged use is necessary for it to be efficacious. It is normally used either as a tea or a tincture. The fruit is anodyne, anti-cholesteremic, anti-diuretic, anti-dysenteric, astringent, blood tonic, cardiotonic, hemostatic, and stomachic. It is used in the treatment of dyspepsia, stagnation of fatty food, abdominal fullness, retention of lochia, amenorrhea, postpartum abdominal pain, hypertension, and coronary heart disease. All varieties of hawthorn can be used, and that's a lot of plants. It may be harvested twice in the season. Fresh flowering tips, then ripe berries. Hawthorn is recognized as being good for irregularities of the heart. It dilates, strengthens, and improves coronary arteries. It is good for overexertion when we surpass the limitations of our age or fitness. Hawthorn is good for arrhythmia and good for angina. Hawthorn is especially good for the middle age. Many herbalists believe that hawthorn may be used as an alternative to digitalis, even when used together, so one can use less digitalis. Big disclaimer there. Talk with your doctor about that, okay? And I will definitely say, though, that when it comes to herbal use of digitalis, go with hawthorn. Digitalis, the foxglove plant, can vary in potency wildly. Um, really, lily of the valley is much safer than the digitalis or foxglove plant. Definitely start with hawthorn. Unless your doctor says otherwise, but don't try to make your own digitalis from foxglove. It's probably not going to end well. Really, I'm serious on that. So, Rodale Herb Book says, as aside from ornamental uses, hawthorn has been valued as a heart tonic, and this value has been increasingly studied in recent years. Promising results have been reported in connection with a variety of heart ailments, including angina pectoris, abnormal heart action. It is also said to be effective in stemming arteriosclerosis. That's the anticholesteremic property, commonly known as hardening of the arteries. Um, and they give instructions on how to make a tincture of it, which you should know by now. And if you don't, any of my books and past shows, you just go back, pull up a video on Rumble. I gave instructions on how to make tinctures, and we don't need to get into that. But now, Physician's Desk Reference for Herbal Medicine. This is the book your doctor looks at if he knows anything at all about herbal medicine and he wants to know how it might interact with your medications or whatever. Crataegus, or hawthorn, is a well-studied herb for use in cardiovascular disease. Historically, it has been used for congestive heart failure, and I really do think it's one of the very best for congestive heart failure. Commonly in combination with cardiac glycosides, as it may potentiate their effects. In other words, it makes heart medication more effective in some cases. In some cases, talk with your doctor. Thereby reducing the dose of cardiac glycosidal drugs, I should say. The use of crataegus in hypertension, arteriosclerosis, and hyperlipidemia is well documented. The active principles are, I can't pronounce that, procyanidins, I guess, or in flavonoids, which cause an increase in coronary blood flow due to the dilatory effects, resulting in an improvement of myocardial blood flow. The drug is positively entropic, gosh, that's hard to say, and positively chronotropic. The cardiac effect of crataegus is said to be caused by increased membrane permeability for calcium, as well as the inhibition of phosphodiesterase with an increase in intracellular cyclo-AMP concentrations. The only reason I can pronounce this stuff at all is my mother was once head of a cardiac and pulmonary program. So I actually grew up hearing these words and reading them a lot, but it's still a tongue twister. A word. Anyway, increased coronary and myocardial circulation, perfusion, and reduction in peripheral vascular resistance were observed. High dose may cause sedation. Yes, it has a mildly sedative effect. The effect has been attributed to the oligomeric procyanidins. Yes, procyanidins, just like we find in cherry bark and such, can have a slightly sedative, slightly narcotic effect. It depends on the dosage. Crataegus extract has been found to prolong the refractory period and increase the action potential duration in guinea pig papillary muscles. One study demonstrated that crataegus extract blocked the repolarization of potassium currents in ventricle myocytes of guinea pigs. Let me just give an aside here. I have never approved of animal research in animal tests and pharmaceutical research. Thank God we now have RFK Jr., who is almost entirely banning them. We're going to use the computers and AI, which, I'm not a big fan of AI either, but the stuff that Fauci promoted and approved of, done to dogs and other animals, is horrific. And it's really hard for me not to wish that some similar was done to him. Yeah, I'm not advocating that, but, if he goes to hell, maybe that'll be his torture. Hopefully he'll convert and come to repentance before then. I wish him only the best, but I could easily make correlations between him and his ilk with the Nazi scientists, and yeah, very much in the same vein. In fact, after World War II, a lot of those Nazi scientists didn't go to jail. The ones that were doing horrible medical experiments on children and well, adults too. I mean, they used Jews as guinea pigs and gypsies and Catholics and a lot of people, and they did horrific things. Most of them did not actually go to jail. A lot of them came to work for the United States government as medical researchers. That's one of those little known facts of history. But yeah, the most horrific things you can imagine they've been doing all along, and RFK Jr. is finally stopping that. So thank you, Donald Trump, and thank God for Donald Trump. My opinion only, like it or not. All right. This effect is similar to that class of 3 antiarrhythmic drugs and may explain the antiarrhythmic effect of Hawthorn. Crataegus is due to its high flavonoid content, may also be used to decrease inflammation, decrease capillary fragility, and prevent collagen destruction of the joints. So, Hawthorn, incredibly useful plant, incredibly grow some hawthorn. And like I said, there are tons of them out there in the wild. So learn to identify them and use them. And like I said, to me, this is one of the essential herbs. I mean, really, if you've got an herb that can help prevent a heart attack, you need to have that herb growing in your property, right? Or at least know how to find it. Or at least have a tincture or, some put away somewhere. Anyway, y'all, have a great week, and I will talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.